Hello, everybody. Welcome to an episode of David Talks. I just got back to Virginia with some friends, and I decided to do an episode of the places in Virginia that are reportedly haunted.
Well,
What?
how was Virginia?
It was good, man. I mean, other than getting a farmer's tan, it was pretty cool. We checked out Ford's Theater, the Monument, Mount Vernon, a ghost tour, Arlington National Cemetery, and the Lincoln Memorial.
Oh, that sounds like a blast. Say, what was one of the most coolest experiences you had on your trip?
I'd say Mount Vernon. It was one of the most beautiful and historic places to visit, and the fact that George Washington was one of the most tallest presidents gives you goosebumps, man.
How tall was he?
Oh, dude, he was pretty big. He was like 6'2" and weighed 175 pounds.
What?
And his house was 11,000 square feet and had 21 rooms.
What?
And he made $25,000 when he was president in 1789.
Equivalent to what?
$913,252.84.
What?
What's the matter?
This man could kick my ass, boy.
Mount Vernon is the home where George Washington lived in Virginia by the Potomac River. It started as a small farmhouse built in 1734 by his father Augustine. George took over the property in 1761 and expanded the house to 21 rooms. But even though it's really made out of stone, it's really wood painted with sand to make it look fancy. Mount Vernon was a big farm that used the hard work of 300 enslaved people to grow crops like wheat and corn. George Washington died there in 1799 along with his wife Martha 2 years later, and in 1858 a group of women decided to have the house restored so others could visit it. Today Mount Vernon is a museum where people can learn about what Washington's life was like, including the years of early America. Now, even though the former mansion of the president is pleasing to look at, it has a much more haunted side than what meets the eye. For many years, both visitors and workers at George Washington's Mount Vernon have reported strange phenomenon. Some say they felt or seen something they can't explain. Many believe that Washington still visits the house he loved so much. One of the oldest stories comes from the 1800s. Back then, women from the Mount Vernon Ladies Association stayed overnight in George Washington's room. A newspaper from 1890 shared a chilling report that the room was haunted. Guests who slept in the bedroom felt an invisible presence, and they swore it wasn't just their imagination. Most of them couldn't even sleep, but all agreed that George Washington visited his room late at night. Mrs. William Beale and her friend asked to stay in that very room. Their candle flickered and went out with a strange noise. They started to get nervous, and both of them individually replied, "No, you're sleeping on the side where George Washington died." "No, you are." They got up, got dressed, and stayed up until the morning, jumping at every sound that they heard. At one point in time, they thought they heard the noise of George Washington's sword clanking in the background. In the 1980s, an interpreter who was working in the house had seen something strange while standing at the central passage. A woman dressed in 18th century clothes, carrying a punch bowl with flowers in it, descending down the stairs, but before reaching the final step, she vanished. Another time, another interpreter thought somebody had snuck into the rope into the little parlor. She walked in and saw an older man with a mustache with his sleeves rolled up. He looked like he was from the early 1900s and looked right up at the woman and said, "What the hell is going on here?" because of the noise from the school kids. Then he vanished, but later on, after that experience, she had gone down and saw his portrait hanging in the house. It was Colonel Harrison Howell Dodge, who ran Mount Vernon for 50 years, until the 1930s. One more story that happened within the Central Passage was an interpreter that felt as if somebody had rushed right past her, like a small girl running. She looked down and saw the bottoms of a skirt and feet in 18th century clothing before it disappeared. The guards that even worked there within the 1980s and 90s also reported that something kept setting off the alarms. First it would go off at the stable. Then, just the amount of time it would take to walk toward the mansion, the alarm in Washington's bedroom would sound. And every time they checked, no one was there. The guards believed it was General George Washington coming home, checking out his horses like he always did, and then heading up into his bedroom. A Mount Vernon security staff shared a strange experience in 2012. Now, this happened during the candlelight tours on the anniversary of George Washington's death that had happened at approximately 10:30 p.m. The house had been cleared, and he locked himself in to check the alarms. While in the mansion study, he heard the sound of heavy keys being carried across the floor above him in the Washington bedchamber. As he headed up the back stairs to check, the sound had suddenly stopped. It was known that George Washington would carry a large set of keys that would jingle as he walked. When he died, his secretary Tobias Lear took the keys from his pocket, and gave them to Washington's enslaved manservant, Christopher Shields. But the bedchamber isn't the only place where they feel that somebody's watching them. Just down the hall, another room has left people shaken, and sometimes even pushed. In 2006, a supervisor from the History of Interpretation department had her first ghostly encounter in the Yellow Room. She was locking up for the night after checking that the house was empty. After walking up the back stairs past Washington's bedroom, she entered the Yellow Room. Suddenly she felt pressure like hands pushing on her shoulder. She turned quickly, but no one was there, and it felt clear that somebody didn't want her in that room. This pushing happened several more times. When she brought someone with her, nothing happened. But alone, she was pushed again. Eventually, she decided to take a new route. She removed her shoes, crossed to a downstairs bedroom, and exited through the central passage, instead of using the back stairs. In 1799, the Yellow Room was the most expensive, fancy guest room in the mansion. And sometimes it's not just the Mr. Keys that you see, but someone standing right in front of you, dressed in gray, watching without a word. In 2006, an interpreter shared her story from Easter morning. She was opening George Washington's tomb. It was quiet, no guests were nearby yet. As she stood in front of the open door, she noticed a strange mist at the far right corner of the tomb. Whenever she would move, so would the mist. It looked like a blurry shape floating in the air. She then took photos. One photo showed the streak of light, and another one captured the blur. Then moments later, as the guests started approaching, the ghostly shape had disappeared. This happened to her 3 times. But wait, there's more. A longtime character interpreter shared this from 2017. She had worked at Mount Vernon since 2004 and had just returned. In December of 2016, spooky stories were circulating. The staff had reported strange noises coming from the 3rd floor and the temperature dropping 20 degrees. On December 14th, which was the anniversary of George Washington's death, one staff member had stayed on the 3rd floor. But the very next day, the energy of that same room had completely shifted. This staff member had looked at the southwest bedchamber. She noticed that an electric candle was glowing, whereas the night before it had been dark. No one had come in to turn it on, especially since that part of the house wasn't open to the public. Then she remembered after George Washington died on the night of December 14th, 1799, Martha Washington had moved into the southwest bedchamber of the mansion. Maybe somehow Martha Washington still remembers that sorrowful day when her husband had died. Now, if you think that the mansion and tomb are the only haunted places nearby of the mansion, think again. In 1979, people that were living near Mount Vernon were terrified of whatever this creature was, and no one, not even the policemen, could explain what it was. Police helicopters flew overhead. Officers even searched the area at night. A long May night came and went, but the strange creature was never found. The Washington Post covered this story on May 12th of 1979. For 9 months, people had been hearing eerie screaming sounds in the woods just a mile from George Washington's home. The sound was described as a low haunting wail, like as if somebody had been strangled. Many theories were shared. A wild boar, frogs, a guy blowing into a wine glass, an owl, a broken CB radio mic, parrot, dog, some believing it was the ghost of George Washington, or even just pigs. One woman even claimed that she saw a 6-foot-tall creature walking upright in her backyard. Some kids recorded the sound with cassette tapes, but no one could figure out what it was. Even the Mount Vernon Ladies Association mentioned the mystery in their meeting notes, though no one ever saw the monster very clearly. People, including some staff, said they had definitely heard it. Whatever it was, it definitely left a long-lasting legend. But not too far off from Mount Vernon lies another haunted place, the place where the 16th President of the United States had got shot. Ford's Theater. On April 14, 1865, Mary Todd Lincoln and Abraham Lincoln had sat at the presidential box watching the play Our American Cousin. Having a normal day, down below, mingling with the audience, was John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and Southern sympathizer who had long plotted to kill Lincoln. But now, with the South defeated, Booth's anger had turned to desperation. That very morning, he had learned that Lincoln would be attending the theater that night. At around 10:15 p.m., as the play reached one of its biggest laughs, Booth made his move. He slipped through the theater's back door and climbed a narrow staircase in the hallway behind the presidential box. He knew the play by heart and waited for a guaranteed laugh line.
Don't know the good matters of society, eh?
so the sound would cover over his shot. He quietly opened the door behind the box, unlocked, with only one man, a footman named Charles Forbes, seated nearby. Booth handed him a card and slipped inside. With the sound of laughter rising, Booth raised a .44 caliber shot Derringer pistol and took one step behind Lincoln. From just inches away, he fired into the back of the president's head, just behind his left ear. Lincoln slumped forward, but didn't fall. Mary screamed, "Oh my God!" Major Rathborne leaped up, and Booth slashed him in the arm with a curved dagger, cutting deep into the bone. Then Booth leaped onto the stage, catching the flag as he leaped 12 feet below, and landed awkwardly, breaking his left leg. Still, he stood up very high with his dagger in his hand. He then cried out, "Sic semper tyrannis," which is Latin for "thus always tyrants," which was the motto of Virginia. Others heard him shout, "The South is avenged." Lincoln was carried unconscious right across the street from the Peterson house, which was a boarding house at the time. Doctors removed blood clots and tried to ease the pressure on his brain, but they knew that there was no hope. His wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, uncontrollably wept, and at 7:22 in the morning on April 15th, 1865, the 16th President of the United States was dead. Secretary of War Edward Stanton, standing right beside him, solemnly said, "Now he belongs to the ages." But what the hell happened to Booth? Was he on the run for a couple days in a tobacco farm near Port Royal, Virginia? Police set the barn on fire, and John Wilkes Booth would be shot in the neck, severing his spinal cord. Thus dying with his injuries, reported, "Tell my mother that I died for my country. Useless, useless, useless." But many people are convinced that Ford's Theater is haunted. Not just by Abraham Lincoln, but the spirits of Mary Todd Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth. Witnesses fully report the assassination sounds of Abraham Lincoln that night when he was shot, as if it was happening again. The sounds of footsteps walking towards the presidential box. Gunshots, people screaming in the background, and nobody's there. But shortly after these sounds are reported, people report to see the silhouette of Mary Todd Lincoln leaning over the presidential box, and her ghostly voice screaming out, "He killed the president," as she points toward the stage. Others have seen Abraham Lincoln's ghost sitting quietly in the presidential box where he was shot. Booth's spirit is also said to linger right on the left side of the stage. Actors shaking uncontrollably, feeling sick to the pit of their stomachs, and the feeling that somebody's watching them, or even forgetting their lines when standing there. Others have even seen the spirit of Booth running across the stage, just as he did the night Lincoln was assassinated. Another location exists in Georgetown near Washington, D.C. This place is called the Halcyon House. Built in 1787 by Benjamin Stoddard, the first U.S. Secretary of the Navy, with its sweeping view of the Potomac River and stately federal-style architecture, it quickly became a symbol of status and elegance in the early American Republic. Over time, the house had many owners of families who were of political and military importance. In 1817, it became the birthplace of Confederate General Richard S. Ewell. But it wasn't until at the turn of the 20th century that the Halcyon House started to gain its haunted reputation, when it was purchased in 1900 by Albert Clemens, who was the nephew of Mark Twain. Clemens was an unusual man, for he believed that constant renovation of the house would allow him to cheat death. For 38 years until his death in 1938, he transformed the property with endless modifications. This included staircases that led to nowhere, rooms with rooms, bricked up doorways, secret passages, and doors that opened into solid walls. He was also rumored to sleep in a different room every night, and he refused to leave the electricity installed. Upon his death, he also left instructions for a doctor to pierce his heart to ensure that he would not return from the grave. After Clemens' death, the Halcyon House passed through numerous owners and fell into disrepair. In the 1960s, it was used briefly as a dormitory for Georgetown University students. And this is when paranormal reports truly began to surface. Students even began hearing footsteps pacing overhead, with no one upstairs present. Doors would even slam shut without warning, with lights flickering on and off, even though the building still lacked proper modern wiring. One student even reported being levitated off his bed, while another awoke to find furniture rearranged in his room. The attic was even said to echo with the soft thud of unseen feet. Now, while this was all going on, a lot of the students, they just left mid-semester of their dorm and went somewhere else. They couldn't bear with the nightly disturbances anymore. But the most commonly seen presence in this building is Albert Clemens himself. Witnesses have also reported a short, balding man dressed in old clothes looking outside through one of the windows and wandering around down the hallways. Some even claim he appears in mirrors watching silently. Some have even reported seeing his face in the closet. One longtime caretaker even reported being followed in the halls by a man who vanished the moment they turn around. To this day, there have been reports of the street lights, which are located right in front of the premises, that flicker on and off without any explanation. Others have reported whispers and moaning from the basement, which was once rumored to be part of the Underground Railroad. One visitor even described being pushed while climbing the staircase, only to find no one behind them. Paranormal investigators during the 1980s had investigated the house. They reported odd readings on their EMF detectors, drops in temperature in rooms where Clemens had modified intensely, strange noises, disembodied voices, objects shifting in the room with nobody there. Even after a multi-million-dollar restoration in the 1990s by million-dollar sculptor John Dreyfus, who transformed the home into a livable gallery. But the hauntings didn't stop. Guests and workers reported eerie feelings. In one instance, a guest in one of the rooms had their phones shorted out once they reached the upstairs hall. Some believe that the architecture of the house, including the stairs that lead to nowhere, is a maze for the living and for the dead, also trapping spiritual energy.
Well, that's some scary crap, boy. I don't even know if I want to go to Virginia and check this crap out.
Well, don't be scared, man. They ain't gonna mess with you. But if you want to go in the daytime, that also works too.
I hate ghosts. I just can't comprehend how I'd react if I even saw Lincoln's ghost.
Well, if you did, what would you tell him?
You ever heard of the iPhone? We don't use telegrams anymore. Everything is instant messaging now. And how did it feel getting shot? Did it hurt?
Well, that would be cool to ask him. By the way, you have an iPhone? What the hell, man? Why not a Samsung?
Because they don't last long and the batteries last a long time.
Hey, Heidi Ho!
Look, man, I'm tired of people saying that iPhones are better than Samsung. You know what's cool about a Samsung? That they're...
Because they don't last long and the batteries don't last a long time. What you got is a piece of crap, boy.
Well, if you just let me finish...
iPhones are better than Samsung. Na 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 na.
Larry needs to shut up. I've had mine for 3 years, and my dad has had his for 5 years.
Come on, I'll beat your ass, boy.
Shut the hell up. All right, that's it. Well, there you go. You want to be in the camera?
Yeah. Hi, Harry. What's cooking with you?
What's cooking with me?
Yeah, what's cooking with you?
That's Cubano, right? Where you from?
Cuba.
Cuba.
Got
We
it.
got a #1 fan here, boy. And this damn thing don't know when to shut the hell up. Yeah, go ahead. Keep barking, boy.
Hey. Chico, come here. He's scared because he's never seen you with that beard.
Yeah, he'll leave once I go up.